welcome to Pitafi World. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at the debate. This is going to be something that we're going to be taking a look at our show today. That is, of course, going to be something of a lot of significance in terms of what is going on both politically and, of course, in terms of the many matters that are decided in the daily affairs and then, of course, in the political and legal arenas as well. Something that particularly took a lot of attention, especially in the past year and a half or so, where a lot of the kind of cases that were taken to the courts were viewed from a particular lens, and a lot of accusations of bias towards not only the Supreme Court, but of course the benches as well, and then the Chief Justice of Pakistan as well. So we're going to try and understand and take a look at the questions that need to be asked in terms of moving forward, and what sort of analysis is warranted in terms of us trying to figure out what exactly is the best way forward in terms of justice to prevail, something that of course is in everyone's favor. In terms of what we're discussing, we're going to be also taking a look at a statistical study that also has been reported in the news, where the decisions of the Supreme Court from December 31st, 2016 to June 30th, 2023 have been analyzed based specifically on how the benches were actually selected, and how that sort of selection also paired with variables such as cases that were politically or non-politically motivated and who was the Chief Justice at the time. Important, of course, also in terms of how this particular issue became so important only recently, also when the Parliament has also repeatedly discussed this, outrightly also has rejected a number of orders by the Supreme Court claiming that this is not something that is just or objective, and has also passed acts of Parliament on this. So we're going to be taking a look at what this means and whether or not, given the fact that how previously we've seen the Chief Justice exercising powers of bench selection is something that is the right way moving forward as well, or there needs to be a reflection in terms of what has been going on and how we need to then take a look at it moving forward as well. We also know, of course, that the new Chief Justice of Pakistan is also expected to be sworn in very soon within this month. Justice Ghazi Faiz Isa is going to be taking over on the 17th of September, and this is going to be then, of course, something perhaps that is also going to be taken into light in terms of whether or not we'll see a change under his leadership. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that in our first segment. Our next one is going to take a look at what is going on around the world, particularly the unfortunate incidents of floods and earthquake in Libya and Morocco that have resulted in the loss of thousands of lives and, of course, damages to property and injuring many others. This is important not only in terms of the kind of humanitarian crisis that is pointing towards, but also in terms of how, unfortunately, political considerations are also impacting the way that the governments are reacting, the way that they're able or unable to, in fact, help the people who are suffering due to these natural calamities. And so we're going to take a closer look at what is going on and what really needs to be done, and whether or not such considerations need to be put aside, can easily be put aside when such natural calamities actually hit, and what needs to be the direction that the international community also needs to follow, despite perhaps certain choices by certain governments and decision makers that may not be as sane as they should be. For this, of course, and more on our discussion for both the segments, I've of course been joined as always by a senior analyst, Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, for a discussion on the judicial system and questions of the selection of benches. We've also been joined by legal experts, Barrister Shabbir Ahmed Shah, Advocate Supreme Court, and Barrister Usama, Ghumman. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll also be joined by Mr. Amanullah Kanrani, who's the Provincial Minister for Law, Parliamentary Affairs, Government of Balochistan. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the discussion and joining us in the debate. And let me start with you, Barrister Shabbir. The discussion, of course, around the selection of benches and then the role of the Chief Justice has been discussed at length, particularly now, perhaps even before, but it took a lot of public notice as well when a lot of the cases, particularly referring to the PTI and the PTI chairman, were discussed, and how the Chief Justice was accused of partiality. I want to know, firstly, if we just take a look at not just these particular cases or certain politically motivated cases, whether or not you think that the way that the Chief Justice has exercised the powers, has the power to exercise in terms of selection of benches, is something that has favored the just way in which cases needed to proceed and has not influenced decisions over the years.
You see, this question with respect to the powers of the Honorable Chief Justice to decide selection of cases has been for the past not just 2 years, but I think over 5 years has been the subject matter of a debate between lawyers, between constitutional experts, and everywhere. My humble opinion on this is that yes, the Chief Justice theoretically and as per the rules is the master of the roster. He has the right to decide where a number of cases should go to, which judge or which bench should be hearing which cases. But we've seen that this power has been criticized and has been subjected to abuse on account of various things which would require another program. But for the present purposes, this power has been criticized, and rightfully so. So there has been a need to structure this discretion, and in essence, the law has been passed by the Parliament, which pertains to structuring of this discretion. But that is also has been called into question before the Honorable Supreme Court of Pakistan. So my humble opinion on this is that even if there are rules, the Constitution takes precedence. And for example, in India and so many other countries, the 5 most senior judges of the Supreme Court, they decide as to whether the cases and selection of cases and where the cases would be marked. That is an instance from India. And for so many other countries, and what was proposed by lawyers for Pakistan as well, that why not the entire Supreme Court can, because end of the day, the powers for even 184(3) vest with the Supreme Court. The Honorable Chief Justice is not the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, as defined in the Constitution, is the Honorable Chief Justice and all the judges collectively. So the power vests with the entire Supreme Court, and therefore my humble opinion is that this power should be structured and should not be in the hands of one person. Now, let's not talk about one individual Chief Justice, because whenever you divide power, whenever you place in a system, there are always benefits to it, because a power concentrated in one hands is always open to abuse. For example, you have a look at the Parliament. The power vests with the entire Parliament, which consists of the National Assembly, the Senate, and then the President. Alternatively, if the same power were to vest in the hands of one person, naturally, that would be subjected to abuse. May I also point out, and you would have seen that there is a judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court on Mustafa Impek's case, where the Supreme Court has itself defined that the cabinet, the federal government means the cabinet, and the power does not vest with the Prime Minister, which is one man alone, whereas the power vests with his entire cabinet. Similarly, the same logic would prevail when it comes to the Supreme Court. So these are my 2 cents on the power and why it should vest with the entire Supreme Court.
Right, absolutely. I understand, and I'm glad you talked about power being concentrated with one individual, and that being something that perhaps is true with different institutions as well. Barrister Usama, the question then I want to ask is, if this is something that lies in the way that things have been happening for quite some time, and the way that, of course, the master of the roster has the power to choose the benches, and I understand it's the Supreme Court, but at the end of the day, the way things have worked, it has also boiled down with the Chief Justice actually being able to select the benches. Are there also then the necessary and requisite checks and balances that then allow for this power not to be actually concentrated with one individual, that whatever that the Chief Justice is able to do is also in line with other checks and balances that have to be ensured for him to be able to exercise certain rights?
Thank you. I think the old adage and the wisdom of ages, which is, and it has been repeated often, repeated to death, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what we have seen is, Sana, as you would recall, there was this Chief Justice, Saqib Nisar Sahab, not very, very long ago. And you know, as Shabisa would appreciate, his public beef with the previous Chief Justice, activist Chief Justice Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry, was that this Chief Justice is exercising power in a manner which is activist, which is beyond what is the proper role of judiciary. But what we saw once the same guy, and there are judgments, and you know, I used to be this junior associate in the Attorney General's office. I remember Saqib Nisar Sahab telling us that no, this we have to respect the parliament, executive, separation of powers, all of that, the stuff. But then once he became Chief Justice, we saw what he did with that power. So I think this, in one sense, I'm really hopeful that what Saqib Nisar unleashed this process, perhaps before him, Iftikhar Chaudhry to some extent, so that created, that precipitated this crisis. And now the crisis has reached such a moment that there is a genuine opportunity. There has been discussion, and one of the reasons we are discussing this discussion wasn't taking place like 10, 15 years ago. So there's this genuine opportunity for the court, for the judges themselves, to divest this power from one Chief Justice and give it to the Supreme Court itself. And this is also not only in the interest of judiciary or for rule of law, it is also in the interest of these justices. So Sana, you would appreciate, and we appreciate, that we live in a very complex sort of environment where there are certain pressures by the forces that operate beyond law. And it is easier to pin down blackmail one person rather than 17 people. There are 17 judges in the Supreme Court. And the same applies to high courts. The chief of a high court is as powerful, enjoys similar powers as the Chief Justice. So what we saw, so it would be in the interest of the very Chief Justices who are going to become Chief Justices, that if they want to operate within the tail of law, if they want to follow the set procedures, and if they want to avoid being blackmailed. Not every person is willing to become martyr like Faiz once he did. Once he was hearing Faizabad Dharna case, and there was a presidential reference, despite the fact that he was restrained by his own Chief Justice to go slow on certain institutions. So I think there's a wonderful opportunity for the judges, and I expect from Faiz that he was victim of this remarkable power, in one sense, this authoritarian part of the Chief Justice, and he would remember that he would reform the court.
Right, absolutely.
Reverse these powers.
And I'll come to that again also, Usama, in terms of what sort of reform is required and how much of that expectation can we make. But what I still want to understand, and Farrukh, I'd like to take your opinion on this, is if this is something so inherent within the way things are and have been, this potential of abuse of this power, then I want to understand why for so long was this, or why was this there in the first place if there is so much potential of this abuse to actually exist, and that the entire ways in which we have seen the different cases being decided or the different chief justices or other judges acting, why is it then inherently this potential to abuse this power actually existed? And could this not have been raised earlier than now? And could this not have been something that wasn't part of our system?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the opportunity. Usama actually used an old adage, so I am also going to do that, but with some amendments. They say that war is too serious a business to be left to journals.
Okay.
Similarly, I think justice is too serious a business to be left to judges, or for that matter, law is too serious a business to be left to lawmakers. I think that it is a tragedy of no mean proportion that this country is now 76-year-old. The constitution, the current constitution is 50-year-old, but we haven't been able to correct all these aspects or the fundamental aspects of judicial system in the country. My concern is that it is not merely about roster. There are so many other issues that you have to look at. How judges are promoted to the Supreme Court, or for that matter, elevated to high courts. Similarly, accountability of judges as well. And then when you talk about the power of suo motu, that seems to actually keep on adding on more to the pendency list. So these are some very important questions and can of worms, to be honest, that one has to actually look into, and we'll have to open them. But the biggest problem right now is that we haven't been able to decide which kind of society do we want. If we want a democratic society, institutions have to be independent, but they have to work like clockwork, that they shouldn't be subjected to populist pressures. But we have seen since Iftikhar Chaudhry's time that somehow this populism has corrupted into judicial work as well, and somehow there have been judges. I'm not going to talk about the current slate of justices. I'm going to talk about the past ones who were more interested in what kind of tickers appear on television, right? And this is a concern that you have to look into. I think that India recently showed a very good example. When Article 370 was being discussed, the case was being heard, they started airing it. They started actually live streaming it on internet. I think that the biggest issue, first of all, if you want to have a democratic society, then you have to have open discussions and open, court hearings. That means that they should also be, live streamed on the internet. Similarly, then you have to talk about this habit of each institution and each individual to monopolize. But there is a fair warning here as well, Sana. We have the habit of actually taking a position according to the persons who might be in power in one position or the other. So today, whatever principles you are going to draw, they might actually go against your own sensibilities tomorrow. For example, accountability, if you want accountability of one justice that you don't like, tomorrow there might be a justice that is good, but there is frivolous litigation against him as well. So what principles are you going to actually adhere to? So we need a national dialogue on these issues. The problem is 76 years down the lane, we haven't even begun that discussion. Sana.
Right, and let me also welcome in the debate, we've been joined by Mr. Amanullah Kanrani, who's the Provincial Minister for Law, Parliamentary Affairs, Government of Balochistan. Thank you very much, Amanullah Sahab, for joining us and being part of the discussion. And we're talking, of course, about the kind of judicial reforms that are required, in particular with the way that the powers of the Supreme Court and the selection of benches have been discussed recently and even before so. And I want to understand your perspective on the issue of why, in the first place, was this matter not resolved earlier than today? Even when we stand today, it's not resolved. This is something that, of course, is still under discussion, and we're still trying to figure out a way forward. And what sort of aspects do you think will be required for us to even be able to move forward with any reforms within the judiciary?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, Amanullah Sahab, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you asking me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Questions with me? Yes. That from the 18th of September.
All right, I'll repeat the question. I'll repeat the question for you once more in terms of the way that we have looked at the powers of the Chief Justice, the selection of benches, and a number of other related issues that have come under discussion. What do you think needs to be done with regards to the way forward in terms of judicial reform, and why do you think this hasn't been done so up till now?
Yes, you know, we know from very beginning, as Justice Qazi said, hails for. We know his legal acumen, we know his integrity, we know his attitude, and we know whatever he has in his mind. We are hopeful, and we are that he will do in accordance with the Constitution and law. He will not favor any single body, either individual or any institution. He will go by book, and that is first of all Constitution. All judges are under the oath of the Constitution. They are required to do in accordance with the Constitution and law. See, Pakistan will start a new beginning from the era of 18 September 2020. The Faisal will lead and will explore a new judiciary. You will see and find a difference between the past and between the future. Inshallah, I am optimistic because it will be the milestone for the...
Right, Amanullah Sahab, I'm happy that you're optimistic about the new Chief Justice coming in, and we all are, of course, with anybody who of course gets to decide matters in any institution, that this is something that they're able to fulfill. But I want to then know what you said in terms of the fact that he will go by the books. What we're discussing at the moment also is going by the books, or how by the books has been in the past. Is that really something that has helped us, is something that we need to continue forward and not actually reflect on it and perhaps move towards a change?
You know, many things were updated by the people and by the bar in the past regime of judiciary did. Particularly two judges, with due apology, I have regard for become partisan in respect of, in terms of the political scenario. Therefore, I feel this situation, that is why I am saying he will go by book, because the polarization which prevails now, it was not up the board and not in accordance with the Constitution. When Constitution will, and every people will feel that is a level play field, and everyone will be happy when they will see so motto, when they will see there is no any criticism, when they will see everybody is equal, either the government institutions or the individuals. They will be treated equally, be respected equally. None of them will say, good to see you. There is no favorite. There is no blue eye in the eyes of law, in the eyes of the Constitution. And Qazi Faisal is an upright man, and with the individuals or any political party, he will go, inshallah, with the Constitution, and he will uphold the Constitution later in spirit.
Right, absolutely, and it's very refreshing to hear your optimism, and you paint quite a picture. Thank you very much, Amanullah Kanrani Sahab, for joining us and being part of the debate. And we really hope so that that's the kind of change that we are able to see. But this puts a question in my mind, Faisal, that why is it that, and I understand it's nothing about, of course, one particular personality or person, and it's definitely not about Justice Qazi Faisal, but I want to understand why is it that there is so much emphasis on a certain individual coming in and being able to change everything. I understand the influence that a person can bring with his agency and voice, but I want to then know whether this is something that is achievable because a certain person is in a certain position. Is this not something that is possible beyond that?
Very good question.
Exactly, Sana. First of all, it's an excellent question, and of course, I'll try to meet your standard which you've set right now. I'll try to be as excellent as you are. Sana, first of all, as they say that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. So this is the case here. Sadly, I mean, the institution we're talking about is the premier institution of justice. And what we're talking about is it's all politics. Why I'm saying this? Because in any state you would find that the three elements of that state are very important. Fourth one I'll highlight later on. First, obviously the parliament, the political fabric of the country, that needs to be politicized because it is of course the political setup and political fabric we're talking about. Then comes next to obviously the element which is very important, of the huge importance, is security, where of course law and order is maintained. Of course all of the civil and military and everyone comes under that. And the third one, which is extremely important, and that is of our justice system, dispensation of the justice. And of course we're talking about Supreme Court as well in it, and our Supreme Justices as well in this. Earlier I was hearing Barrister Shabbir when he highlighted an excellent solution to it, when he was saying that the full court should be in the bench, especially when we are obviously talking about the cases of huge importance for people at large. Of course the constitutional matters of the Pakistan. And here problem is that as soon as a bench is formed, people already know what kind of decision they're going to get. And this is a sort of a problem which we are facing. I think the only institution that needs to be politicized is of course parliament, and is of course political fabric of Pakistan. Rest of all of the institutions, they should never be politicized. And by the way, we have been seeing that not only these institutions, I mean, me being a journalist, I mean, I can see around that we ourselves are very politicized in the current situations. We should not be politicized. And if we talk about the obviously our justice system,
right, Faisal,
our Supreme Court, Sana, very important.
But I want to know what you're proposing, because how exactly are you going to prevent the courts from being politicized?
Yeah, Sana, the conclusive remark I have here is that the law and our justice system, judicial system, should only have one affiliation, and that is with law and constitution. That's it, nothing else. They should not be having any political affiliations with any of the political parties.
How?
Well, the institution should grow itself, not be relying on the political party.
How exactly are you going to establish that? And let me bring that question to Barrister Shabbir also, because of course, essentially, whatever institution we talk about, and especially if we talk about the courts, they are, of course, at the end of the day, made of humans, and they bring their subjectivity or their affiliations with them as well. And perhaps the system in itself should be a process which eliminates this bias and ensures that that doesn't come into play in actually from justice to prevail. And I want to know, Barrister Shabbir, how exactly then can that be avoided in terms of what Faisal is referring to, of political affiliations that judges may or may not have, or any sort of inclinations that may or may not have. I'm sure there are barriers to this within the system. And secondly, also add to that there's been a lot of requests, especially with the recent cases, of a full court bench whenever there have been objections raised by any political party or leader towards the selection of benches. There have been, of course, numerous examples of when this has not happened. I want to know what, especially in matters of politically important cases, is preventing, or why is it that full court benches are not always a good idea in politically motivated cases, and whether you think full court benches will be can possibly remove some of the problems we were earlier discussing in terms of selection of benches.
Sana, I want to set the record straight by making a point that by far, our judiciary is the least in terms of its selection and appointment, least politicized. If you look at United States, for example, judges of the lower judiciary are elected. Even the Supreme Court there consists of political favorites. I mean, that we all know. So insofar as the appointment of judges is concerned, there is you would find that the political system and they are not politicized as such. When it comes to whether they have a political or can they form a political opinion,
Okay.
do they feel tilted towards one political party? Well, this is just human, like you pointed out. There is nothing that you can do about it. Every judge, first of all, before being a judge, is a human being, and he or she can have or can form a political opinion. Now, the only way to curb is, and therefore, you would see that the Supreme Court sits in benches. If you were to look at the lower courts, they sit as single judges, and then as you go up, the Supreme Court, the smallest bench that you can have in the Supreme Court, more often than not, is 3-member bench. But in political cases, I think the perfect solution to it would be that you form benches, either a full bench. So that is one point. The second point that I want to make, because when I saw your program, I was quite happy that the topic is how do we bring judicial reforms? If you allow me, I wanted to shed some light on that. That you see, as a practitioner, I've been practicing for the past 15 years,
Go ahead.
Which is not a long time. These are the 3 problems that I see with the judiciary. Number one, the backlog of cases. Primarily, I mean, I'm a practitioner primarily before the Sindh High Court and then also at the Supreme Court. But you know, how long does it take for a simple suit to be decided before the Sindh High Court? It takes 5 years if you're lucky. The appeal would take another 2-3 years, and by the time it reaches Supreme Court, it would collectively, if you look at the litigation, it would take ordinarily 15 years. That is a standard lawsuit that it would take this much time. Now that is sad. What is the proposal? Why does it happen? I feel that one, the judges do not impose costs in our in our cases. So I think, and I've been a beneficiary also. At times, I myself would have sought adjournments. But I think if we promote imposition of costs, if you look at England, there and also in other countries, costs are imposed. If even if you win the case, you still have to pay costs because you could have avoided this litigation. Secondly, the time has to be regulated. How do you regulate time? Ourselves, we argue for a number of hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then for days and days and days. I think there should be a select time for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, which should be given to each counsel. That is a very simple solution. And if that is followed, the backlog could be avoided. Now, third, I would want to shed some light on what Pitafi Saab said, that these courtroom proceedings should be recorded. When you say recorded, in India they are recorded. Luckily, in the Supreme Court, if I'm not able to travel to Islamabad, we have a video link. So that is also, I don't know if it is recorded. But what happens with recording? With recording, 2 things happen. Judges become punctual. They come on time. They because there is somebody always watching them. They are courteous to lawyers, and then they conduct themselves properly. So you can avoid so many things. And through your program, let me also tell you that the law minister for Sindh, Mr. Umar Sumro, he has, I was discussing it with him, he's bringing in a proposal that at least insofar as Sindh, he is in the process of introducing live video streaming. Now, before I leave, I want to point out one thing with your permission, because I've already taken too much of your time. And this, if I don't say, I think I would be failing in my duty, which is, I'm a practitioner of the Sindh High Court. There is, with a lot of respect, one judge, my lord, I would not name him, but he, for the past 5 years or 7 years, comes to court, never has he come to court at 8:30 in the morning. He comes to court at 9:30, and out of 5 days, 3 days he comes and 2 days he's absent. Now there is no one who can ask anything as to why do you come to court late. The fault lies where? In our bar councils, and with respect, the worthy Honorable Chief Justice of the Sindh High Court. I mean, if you ask this from any lawyer in Sindh, they will testify to this. So this is wrong because the other judges who are hardworking, who come on time 5 days a week at 8:30, what is their fault? So I think we need to correct all of this. I was thinking 10 times before making up my mind whether should I say it or not. But I think this is only just that I should say it, and it's so that the litigants, the poor litigants, they should get access to justice. And this is the best that I could have done in your program, because through you, a lot of people are listening, and maybe my lord, the same judge listens to this, and from tomorrow he comes to court on time. Thank you.
Right, absolutely, and I hope that that is the case. And I guess we'll find out at 8:30 or 9:30 tomorrow. Barrister Usama, the issue of accountability then, of course, is not limited to the judges alone. I then also want to know then, when we talk about accountability then of the superior judges, the senior judges, or the Chief Justice, then where does that accountability lie? And I understand the Constitution is there, but I want to know that is there accountability within the judicial system, within the lawyers community, from different associations? I understand that a number of issues have been raised by the Bar Association as well, even recently, but I want to know that despite that, the way that the system has actually worked in how we have seen, it seems that there is, of course, one thing that says that is there on paper, and another that we see actually happening, and it seems that somehow or the other, the Chief Justice or the senior judges are able to navigate through that, and especially in terms of the selection of benches, it seems then it's something that is discouraging disagreement with the Chief Justice, and if that is the case, then how exactly, where on one side the system is discouraging disagreement, will the system actually move towards a place where there is accountability and questioning and criticism of the Chief Justice?
Thank you, Sana. Very good question. And I think where the system has worked, and clearly it hasn't worked in Pakistan. This system, which nominally is called separation of powers. So what we often forget, that the separation of power is sort of fiction. Separation of power goes hand in hand. There's the other side of the coin, and that is, one side is separation and the other side is checks and balances. Separation of powers, a system cannot work without checks and balances. The problem in Pakistan has been, and what Shabbir Saab very pointedly just narrated, that we have some sort of separation and independence, especially vis-a-vis judiciary. It is remarkably independent on paper, except that there are extra legal pressures, and that is where its independence crumbles. But where there is no extra legal pressure, our judiciary, in terms of independence, is one of the most remarkably independent judiciary. But there are not systems, checks and effective checks and balances systems in place. So let me very quickly that what could those checks and balances could be. There could be two places where those checks and balances could be, one external and one internal. Our judiciary, very sadly, it just decimated the external checks and balances. Two examples. So Parliament does this constitutional amendment. One of the things where the Parliament or other branches can keep an eye on the judiciary is at the time of the appointment. Parliament did this very modest appointment. They took away the powers of the appointment solely from the hand of Chief Justice and passed it on to two very representative bodies. One was Judicial Commission and the other was Parliamentary Committee. The Supreme Court threatens to undo 18th Amendment unless that amendment was not watered down and Chief Justice and Judiciary was not given the primary role. The Parliament caved in, they passed an amendment on the demands of the Judiciary, 19th Amendment. But even then there was very and there was this minor scrutiny of the Parliament in the form of parliamentary committee. The Supreme Court was still not happy. Through a judgment, they made that parliamentary committee redundant. So, Sana, very funnily, and it was done in a case in which there were like 4 judges on whose the parliamentary committee had raised certain objections. And you were surprised that the parliamentary committee was retrospectively at this time. All 4 judges.
Okay, unfortunately, Barrister Usama, I'm unable to hear you, but thank you very much for being part of the debate. We're almost out of time for this segment as well, and thank you very much, Barrister Shabbir Misha, for being part of the discussion as well, and talking to us at length about something that is extremely important, and we hope that we move towards these reforms sooner rather than later. Farrukh, I'm sure you'd like to add something to that, but also I want to talk about a little bit about the fact that it's always hard to give up powers, however problematic they might be. How do you think that this will be something that the Chief Justice, whoever it is able to actually accomplish?
Right, Sana, thank you very much once again for the opportunity, because I wanted to add many things here. Earlier, Barrister Shabbir actually touched the raw nerve when he was talking about pendency of cases, spanning up to 15 years. I remind you that, a few years, actually a day before Iftikhar Chaudhry's, sacking, I was in Supreme Court, and there was a case related to my own family, right, that had gone on for 20 years. It had actually gotten elevated to the Supreme Court of Pakistan, and since then, it has been more than 15 years. The problem hasn't been solved even yet. So this is one example. I did not want to bring my own case up, but this is important to remember. Now, you asked a brilliant question that was focused at Faisal, and that was individuals versus institutions. So my humble summation is this is the biggest problem. We have been obsessing about Iftikhar Chaudhry, this justice or that justice, but we haven't focused on how important it is to build up institutions, right? Regarding concentration of power, the biggest issue right now is that you have actually given the Chief Justice of Pakistan 2 hats. One, he is the Chief Justice of Pakistan. Secondly, he is also the head of Supreme Judicial Council. Why do you have this kind of, monopoly of accountability?
Yeah.
Why not actually create another court that actually supervises the Supreme Court of Pakistan? It should have titular powers, shouldn't have too many powers, but at least when it comes to accountability, there should be an outside judge who should be hearing those cases, right? This is the biggest problem. And since you asked me whether it is possible or not, I remember those days, Sana, when Islamabad High Court did not exist, and everybody kept on saying it is something that cannot be done. Similarly, Shariat courts, similarly, so many other courts. But when we actually focus on these things, we end up, building things up, and they become substantial. So there has to be an accountability process above the Supreme Court, where the same judge who is being accused should not be sitting on the bench. And that can be ensured when the Chief Justice is not also the head of Supreme Judicial Council.
All right, we're now going to be moving on to our next segment, which takes a look at what is happening in both Libya and Morocco. And it's, of course, unfortunate. We really feel this huge tragedy where so many people have been affected. But what's perhaps more worrisome is the way that the political dynamics are also shaping the way that we are responding to a kind of humanitarian effort that perhaps needed to see no bounds. Faisal, when we take a look at the situation, how relevant do you think are the ways in which the political variables are impacting the process of aid flowing into these countries, of actually enabling the people to get help? And do you think that this something is a choice that perhaps could not have been chosen?
Sana, it is highly unfortunate that the northern African countries, two of them, of course, Morocco I am talking about, and Libya, both of them obviously, I mean, Morocco is known for its tourism and beach tourism and all, and obviously both of them, they are having political turbulences right now in their countries. But you know, if we look at the response of the world, I mean, that response of the world so far is yet to be seen of that magnitude. We know that of course Egypt is obviously extending its help, and the Middle Eastern countries, they are extending their help, but we keep on forgetting one aspect. I mean, this is a clear case of climate change. Of course, both of the countries, they have nothing to do with it. They are very responsible countries when it comes to industries, when it comes to obviously carbon emissions. Both of them, they are very responsible countries, same like Pakistan. I mean, we saw that we were facing the grunts of the climate change. We sought help, and that help, I mean, frankly speaking, we did not get that help from the world which we required since last year, last year's floods. And same is the case with, of course, Morocco and Libya here. They are seeking help, but unfortunately, when it comes to extending a helping hand, it is not being extended the way it should be extended, especially to the countries that has nothing to do with deteriorating the atmosphere of this world. Both of the countries, they urgently need help, and the world should.
Farrukh, do you agree with the fact that the response of the international community is not enough? Don't you think that there are also problems in the way that we have seen acceptance of aid, especially coming in from Morocco?
Right, Sana, and it is a very important question, because I think that the biggest problem with the world at this moment is crisis fatigue. There have been one too many crises all over the world. Earlier Faisal was talking about Africa. So let me remind people that in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a famine that is very intense even right now. Similarly, as he pointed out, there were floods in Pakistan. There have been floods and similar kind of catastrophes all over the world. So there should have been the bodies that we agreed to in various COPs, right, and various climate change bodies, but that doesn't seem to be that quick a response that is needed. Having said that, there is a difference between flash floods or freak floods and then earthquakes. I think that it is correct to attribute the flooding to climate change. But when it comes to earthquakes, you cannot actually clearly attribute that to the same thing. But despite that, one has to actually look at the way the world community actually focuses on these issues. And I think that one good thing is that UNGA is meeting as we speak. So these issues can be actually flagged there, and perhaps there is a possibility that there might be a better response in coming days regarding these issues. Sana.
Absolutely, and that is, of course, the hope. Thank you very much, Faisal and Farrukh, as always, for being a part of the debate. And we hope that both sides are able to look at the situation in terms of the priority of the people that need our help at this time, and that is the major concern, and perhaps the only concern at the moment of everyone involved, and they're able to understand that and take decisions accordingly. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow.